Me now is retired US Army Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who's currently the Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at the Centre for European Policy Analysis. Good to see you on Sky News. Thank you for your time today. So are the tactics, as far as Russia is concerned, changing? They had said they would withdraw from key areas of the north, Chernihiv, Kiev specifically, and there is evidence of that, isn't there?
Yeah, Nick, they haven't changed the tactic. What they're doing is changing the operational focus. There's a very important date coming up, 9 May, which is Victory Day in Russia, where they celebrate the end of the Great Patriotic War, World War II. And so, as you know, there's always a huge victory parade there at Red Square. And so the Kremlin is desperate to get some sort of victory, something to celebrate on 9 May. So I think that because they have been hammered by the Ukrainians and they've failed to achieve any of their objectives anywhere near Kyiv, they are redeploying forces so that they can focus on finishing off Mariupol and gaining total control in the Donbass, so that they can have something to declare, something to show. And of course, that means that the hell that people in Mariupol are already enduring is only going to get worse. Especially within the context of what we've seen in the last 24 hours, the atrocities committed by Russian troops outside
so it really is a regrouping and that focus on this city, which has now been under siege for several weeks.
Yeah, exactly. The Russians have culminated in their original offensive design. They don't have the ability to continue sustained land offensive operations. And so exactly as you say, they're regrouping, trying to build up enough supply and ammunition to go ahead and try to achieve something that they can celebrate on 9 May. And that's going to be, I think they're going to try and finish this incredibly strong city of Mariupol.
And that means, does it, that efforts to provide any kind of humanitarian corridors from now, for goodness knows, for a few more days yet, are perhaps going to fail?
I would not trust any Russian for 1 second that offers some kind of humanitarian effort. And I have to say, I don't know what we in the West are waiting for. I mean, we are standing by as another Srebrenica situation unfolds, where, of course, we're providing weapons. Of course, we are providing capability, but we're not talking about winning. We're not talking about smashing the Russians, breaking their back now while they were on the back foot. While the Ukrainians have a chance to break their back, we're not willing to talk about doing that. And there's not the sense of urgency, at least from the United States, Germany, or France, to help bring about an end to what Russia is doing. And so what we're going to have, I'm afraid we're going to see more and more pictures of atrocities of Ukrainians being murdered by Russian troops.
So what more should the West be doing?
First, we need to talk about winning. I mean, this is not just symbolic, it's an attitude, it's an approach. We have deterred ourselves. We've been spooked by the possibility that the Kremlin might use a nuclear weapon or they might use chemical weapon. And when you think about the combined political, diplomatic, and economic and military power of 30 nations of NATO to Russia, and yet we've refrained from doing things that we know we need to do. Secondly, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. They specifically need the ammunition for 122 millimeter and 152 millimeter rocket launchers and artillery, so that they can destroy what's actually causing most of the damage inside Ukraine. It's Russian artillery and rocket launchers.
What about calls for this no-fly zone? Off the cards still?
Unfortunately, I'm afraid so. I signed a letter early on, along with some other people, knowing that there would be resistance to it. But at some point, we're going to have to wake up to the fact that the Russians are using our reluctance to continue what they're doing, smashing cities. And I was very troubled today to hear that there's already some talk about, oh, if the Russians withdraw, we might be able to lift sanctions. Holy hell, how can we even be talking about that right now when we have the opportunity to break their back so that they cannot continue to do this? If we don't do it, and I'm talking about like within the next 3 weeks, so there's got to be some urgency here. If we don't do this, then what the Kremlin will do is what they always do. They will just kind of wait until we lose interest, and then they'll pick back up wherever they left off. That's what they've been doing since 2008 when they invaded Georgia. So we've got to think more strategically, more boldly about breaking the back of what the Kremlin is trying to do, or we're going to be doing this again in just a couple of years.
A couple of quick questions. What Biden said last week, which was seen as regime change, rowing back on that, was that quite unhelpful?
It was unhelpful that so many people immediately tried to walk it back. Look, people almost fainted when Ronald Reagan talked about the evil empire, or made the joke about we'll begin bombing Russia in 5 minutes, and Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. But that he was saying what people knew needed to be said. And I think my president also spoke for many people when he said that Putin should not remain in power. Of course, he said, look, it's not the U.S. policy to advocate for regime change, but he said what we all want, which is for this guy to not remain in power. And he said he was addressing the Russian people also. Eventually, they're the ones that are going to have to solve that part of the problem.
Yeah, and just finally, you referred to this right at the start of this, the 9th of May, really seen by the Russians as a key deadline. They need to have done something. So perhaps that is what they will see as the end of the conflict?
I don't know that they'll see it as end of the conflict, but I can envision them declaring victory, that, they faced down the West, they faced down NATO, they have ruined Ukraine's economy, because Putin always talks about Ukraine is not actually a state. And I imagine that the Duma will support an idea of a referendum that says all of Donbass, not just the 1/3 that they originally had, that all of Donbass are now independent states. And of course, they would want to match that up with Mariupol finally culminating or falling. And then they put a bow on that and call it a big victory. And of course, none of us should be willing to we should not put any pressure on Kyiv to accept any kind of negotiated settlement. We have a window right now. We have a window to push them back to the February 24 line. That should be minimum our objective.
All right, we'll have to end it there. But thanks very much indeed for joining us on Sky News today, Ben Hodges. Thank you.